Hi, I'm Joshua Carding, and welcome to another Death Battle prediction video, but first, War Machine versus Genos. The fight basically went as I thought it would. There was a good amount of stuff that they kind of, I suppose lowballed for War Machine, but when you get Marvel characters like Iron Man, who have just done such a wide variety of things, it becomes kind of important for them to set a specific, frame of reference for his abilities. So I'm not too surprised that they ended up having him be down where they did. That said, the animation was really good. There were a couple of weird moments in it, specifically the, Dragon Ball Z punching sections. It didn't really fit for me, but there was a lot of other really good shit in the fight as well. I really don't have too much to say for it, but and then we go into Esdeath versus Grey Fullbuster, which is really continuing the trend so far of having fights that I'm sure people are excited for, but it's just kind of not really what I'm into. But that said, this is actually kind of an almost more interesting fight itself. There's been a lot of debate among the community as to who wins this one, and a lot of it does come down to the interpretation of a few certain things. So to get it right out of the way for stats, both of them are roughly comparable when Esdeath is in her base form. We'll talk more about the additional form in a little bit. Basically, when they're both in base, you have about, I believe it's around 400 teratons for both of them. And in terms of speed, Grey is going to be a lot faster. I believe it was a relativistic feat coming out to 6% the speed of light for Grey scaling to Urza. It was an interception of a meteor, I believe. Meanwhile, Esdeath scales to about Mach 800, so she is definitely on the down in terms of speed, which is definitely an important advantage when you consider how close the AP gap is. But then you have a few things that kind of tweak it more towards the middle. Specifically, Esdeath has her ice manipulation abilities. Her time stop is actually one of the big ones that if someone's faster than you, a time stop can easily hold them in place and make it so you can finish them off if it's a decently close AP gap. So the question is then, would her time stop work on Grey? So Grey is among a group of people who basically have a resistance to ice. He is not immune to ice, mind you. He can eat ice, but he is not immune to it, and if he eats too much of it or too strong of it, it can hurt him in the long run. But essentially, he's been stabbed, impaled by ice before, and he wasn't able to just shrug it off like nothing happened. So her ice attacks are still going to hurt him. Energy is energy at the end of the day. When you're exerting force on something, you're still exerting that force on it. So then her time stop would basically hold him in place, let her finish him off. But the question is if that resistance nullifies the time stop. Because one of the things is that, what was the main character? Tatsumi? Yeah, Tatsumi. Sorry, I haven't actually watched the show, but I've delved in and done some good research. So Tatsumi, when he resisted it, is because his Imperial arms basically adapted a cold resistance to be able to resist and nullify the time stop so he could move in it. So the question is if his resistance would be equivalent to that. So ultimately, I think it does come down to a matter of attack potency. So the fact that they're very even would mean that, yes, it would resist it. But the issue here is that that's not when she's at her strongest. Her strongest is when she uses Commander-in-Chief, which is, for some reason, people have an issue with giving it to her. It took her some time to achieve it in canon, but it would still be her at her strongest. People had no problems with mobs suddenly getting to 100% or question mark percent, when that isn't how it works in canon. People have no problem with that. So I think it's just a little bit of a strange thing that people are trying to take away Commander-in-Chief from her when it doesn't make sense. And so Commander-in-Chief, she absorbs her ice soldiers, and she gets a massive boost to her attack potency. Now, how big of a boost is the question? Well, with it, she managed to create a storm that reached up into, let me see the exact numbers for that. So it was 411 petatons to 16 exatons. So we're dealing with now being 1,000 times stronger at the best, and roughly 300 or so times stronger at the lower end of that calculation. So, actually, I think it's more than something around that level. So, either way, really big AP gap now. So at that point, yes, I think her time stop would be able to work on Grey, because it is colder, stronger ice than he's ever had to deal with, and anyone in Fairy Tail has ever had to deal with. So at that point, with that big of an AP gap, with her time stop working, it just gets to the point where he can't really do much to her. I've seen some people argue that using iced shell would work on her to seal her, but with an AP gap like that, she can just break out of it, and it kills him. Though he's apparently shown a very, very large eagerness to use it, and gets stopped from using it a lot. So I could honestly kind of see it going that way, where he tries to use it on her, and it just she breaks out of it, and he ends up dead from it. And then there's apparently a lost ice shell, which erases the memory of him from everyone who knew him. It's a really weird specification, but sure. So ultimately, I don't see this going in Grey's favor. The stat gap is just a little bit... The stat gap is really large from a speed point of view, but it's also really, really major from a strength point of view, and I don't really think that Grey can really do anything to her. So that's essentially what this one's going to boil down to. The sprite animation that we saw so far on the Death Battle cast actually looks really good. So again, it looks like it's going to be a really good episode. I just really hope we get some things that are a little bit more my taste. And well, we're getting episode 125 soon, so we'll see what they do for that milestone. And I will see you guys for the next one.